This story is a bit different as it involves a Korean woman and not a Thai woman. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a sad story where he loses his wife and has to deal with her family once she passes. And yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking. It's a bit of a long one, so grab a coffee and let's jump into this one. This is a story about me, a foreigner, marrying a Korean woman. The scamming, racism, discrimination, dishonesty, and ruthlessness is not from the Korean wife, but from her family, friends, the Korean legal system, and the Korean government. Even with a great marriage, you might be marrying into a culture that despises you. In many Asian cultures, the foreigner spouse and even the half-foreign children are outsiders. They're to be scammed and disrespected by in-laws, the government, and the legal system. You might have a wonderful wife, but this story is a warning about the dishonesty and racism you can face from your wife's family, friends, and a foreign society in general, in a country that is very nationalistic. Every Korean family is different, of course. I personally know of 6 men who had their Korean wives passed away, and in each case the Korean in-laws were nasty, ruthless, and even stole from the children. Maybe there are some foreign men whose Korean in-laws were decent people. I personally don't know of any cases. In my case, and the case of others, the Korean in-laws will be mostly polite as a sign of respect to their daughter, but once she passes away, the gloves come off. You don't have a blood bond. You are genetically different. You are an inferior person. In August 2004, I met my Korean wife while walking along the beach with a buddy of mine. 3 months later, we were married. We were happily married for 16 years until she passed away from cancer 16 years later in August 2020. I was very much admired. My wife was a real catch, stylish, elegant, pretty, slim, intelligent, graceful, classy. The list goes on. She was the type of woman that business and political leaders marry. I was just an average, maybe below average man with an amazing lady. Unfortunately, we never had a child. It always broke my heart to see other men playing with their children, but I could not do that. I always knew I'd be a fantastic father. I'm intelligent, tall, strong, fit, I don't drink, and I don't smoke. It was disappointing not having a child, because I knew guys that were losers, welfare bums, and alcoholics that had children. I was doing the right thing, but no children. My wife had been married before to a Korean man. She told me that he used to abuse her. She told me he was not very nice to her. She looked after herself very well, went to the gym, was slim, and later, when she were in her late 40s, had a bikini body that would put women in their 20s to shame. Despite this, I could tell that she had given birth before, as she had a little stretch mark. I asked about this, and she said that yes, she had given birth before, but that the baby had passed away at birth. This is very traumatic for a woman, so I never asked her about it anymore. We tried to have a child. She got some medical treatment, but nothing happened. She had, at one stage, discussed adopting a child, but I was not keen on adoption. I later discovered she really did not want to have a child. In this story, in no way do I wish to be negative towards my wife. She was a wonderful wife, not perfect, and then again, neither am I. I was to discover a secret 10 years later. It turns out the baby she gave birth to had never passed away, but was raised by an aunt. She found our address and came to our home. I was not home at the time. My wife said she had something to tell me. She was crying a lot and told me that she had lied about the passing of her baby. Her child was now, I think, 18 years old. I don't know why she told such a horrible lie. Maybe it has something to do with Korean culture. Now I knew why we didn't have a child. She already had one. How could she have a child with me and have that child live with us while her first child was being raised by her father's sister? My wife did not have any contact with her daughter, nor did anyone from my wife's family. In effect, the daughter was abandoned. I don't know why. Years later, there was an American guy working at the same place as me. His wife also passed away from cancer. After she passed, he also discovered his wife had a secret child that he did not know about, and she had also been abandoned. I met my wife's daughter. She spoke no English, despite years of English lessons, and my Korean was very, very basic. Despite this, I was always very nice to her, as she was my wife's daughter. Out of respect for my wife, I should respect her daughter. Always I'd buy her something for her birthday and Christmas, and she was always welcome to our home. Despite the warmth that I shown her, she was polite but always distant. My wife was disappointed with her daughter, as the meetings between them always involved money, the daughter complaining that she needs money all the time. The daughter was living in a poorer part of town with the aunt and working a minimum wage job in a fast food place. My wife found it difficult to become attached to her daughter because of all the money requests. But despite this, my wife did give her daughter money, a few thousand here and there, to help pay for additional schooling. That turned out to be a waste of money, as she would start a course but not finish. Our life was fantastic. I had a cushy job and the money was decent. We lived in a nice large apartment near the most popular beach in Korea, had a dog, bought a boat and ran a little scuba diving business. And we also travelled overseas 3 to 4 times a year. We had plenty of money, a nice home, leisure activities, holidays, and a stable, hassle-free marriage. We had a lifestyle that most people would envy. Weekends at the marina on the boat, parties, and everything else. As life goes, we were easily in the top 5% in Korea. In 2016, my wife started to get a bit bloated. I thought, what's going on here? Is it just her getting older? We did not realize that this was the start of ovarian cancer, the most lethal cancer. In July 2016, we went on a great scuba diving holiday in the Philippines. This was going to be our last overseas trip together. In November 2016, just after my birthday, she felt some pain during bedroom time, so we went to the women's clinic. They found some growths. In most cases, these are not dangerous, so we stayed calm. After more testing, it was discovered that she had cancer. We had a very healthy lifestyle, so we're shocked that she had cancer. What I later discovered is that Korean doctors lie a lot to their patients. I think it's what they are taught. Their way of being kind is to offer false hope. She had stage 4 ovarian cancer. The survival rate is extremely small. I knew nothing about cancer, so I spent hours on the internet trying to find a solution. There was nothing. I did not want her to undergo chemotherapy, as I knew it really doesn't work, but there wasn't much we could do about it. Culturally, Koreans have a lot of faith in doctors. Christmas 2016. My wife goes into surgery. The operation lasted 6 hours, and at one stage she stopped breathing. Despite all the scans, the doctors find cancer they never knew existed. I found that hard to believe. They ended up removing part of her bowel, and she wakes up with a colostomy bag attached to her abdomen. She was meant to be in intensive care, but the place was driving her crazy, so after 12 hours she requested to go into the general ward. 24 hours later, she was walking up and down the ward despite having 6 different drips attached to her body. She was a tough woman and a fighter. During the next 4 years, she put up an incredible fight that she had no chance of winning. Horrible skin rashes that covered her body, immense pain, and nothing helped. I spent 4 years sleeping on the sofa as it's near the bedroom. At one stage, my wife could see I was struggling, and by this time I had insomnia which would continue for 7 years and affect my health. She asked if I wanted a divorce. I was shocked by that question, and I said no. We married for better or worse, in sickness and health, and I was going to keep my promise. I'm Catholic, probably not a very good Catholic, but I'm not going to abandon my sick wife. If I was the one with cancer, she would not abandon me. I had to cut back on work, and she could not work. No more overseas trips, no diving, no boating, less income, and lots of medical expenses. During the 4 years, we rarely saw our daughter. She did visit her mother sometimes during chemotherapy, and of course, my wife got requests for money. And my wife being my wife, she did give her a few thousand. I'm not after any sympathy. Yes, I had a hard time, but I did not have cancer. My difficulty was only 1% of her difficulty. Towards the end, I just had to stand aside and just let her pass away. We had 2 properties, a smaller one her mother lived in that was in my name. I was holding this property in trust for my wife's mother. I don't know why we had this arrangement. Our main home was in my wife's name. I made a big contribution and during her cancer paid off the mortgage. My wife wanted me to have the apartment that we lived in. I did not discuss this with her until she became very sick. To discuss earlier would be to admit that she would pass away. To transfer the apartment to my name presented a few problems. First, lots of tax to be paid. Second, there was a mortgage and Korean banks usually don't lend to foreigners. Eventually, my wife made a will. She did not want to consult lawyers and was bedridden. She was advised by her sister. Her sister agreed to be the executor. My wife wrote out the will, signed it, had 2 friends sign it as witnesses. Her sister signed the will and agreed to be executor of the will. I did not like the sister being the executor, as I did not trust her. My wife is going to die. I'm not going to tell my wife that her sister is dishonest. My wife had an elderly mother that she used to give money to from her business, which later did not make any money. My wife's sister did not give money to her mother as she was too lazy to work and just stayed at home all day. Koreans do some really weird stuff with their money. My wife passed away with no money in her retirement account. For some reason, she was paying it into her sister's retirement account. So, my wife worked, had no money in her retirement account when she passed away, but her sister, not having worked, has money in her retirement account. Anyway, that's what my wife wanted to do, so that's okay. A few times a year, I had to meet my wife's family. I was always shocked because my wife was very refined and classy with excellent table manners. In contrast, her family were like hillbillies. During meals, they would always chew loudly, and the men, although civil, lacked the finer graces such as opening the door for their wives and wearing cheap polyester clothes. The worst was when one family member, I won't say who, would stay with us for a few days and use the toilet and leave the door open whilst using it. These people had no money and always drove very cheap cars. Maybe I'm just being a snob. So why am I telling you this about her family? It's their mindset. Unrefined, no class, and the most important thing, always needing money. My wife was getting closer and closer to passing away. A few weeks before my wife passed away, a friend of mine that is Canadian, his Korean wife also had cancer. She passed away. She had never worked and they had 2 young boys. My friend bought life insurance for his wife, and she received a payout from the insurance policy. That money was used for medical bills. After she passed away, there was still a lot of money left in her bank account. My friend is now a widower in a foreign country with 2 young boys. He needs that money for his children. My friend's Korean in-laws somehow managed to empty his wife's bank account. Effectively, these people were stealing from the children. I've lived in Korea 20 years. I'm not anti-Korean and I'm not racist. There are some wonderful aspects to the Korean society. Every place has pluses and minuses. I have learned through various experiences to know to be nice, polite and helpful, but trust no one and always watch your back. So I kept a low profile in Korea. The police and the court systems are biased against foreigners. Of course, being careful has to be done everywhere, but more so in Korea. Violent crime and drug crime is rare, but corruption, fraud and rip-offs are rampant. Yes, I was generalizing. I thought if Korean in-laws will steal from their grandchildren, nieces and nephews, what will they try to do to me? August 2020, it's breakfast time for my wife, but she does not want to eat, so I wait and maybe she'll eat later. I make a shake for her, the shake is gone. I did not know it at the time, but she was pouring her shakes into the bin next to the bed. She's getting worse, so I call her best friend and we take her to the hospital. I don't like to get in the way of health professionals, and me hanging about achieves nothing. Having taken my wife to the hospital so many times for treatment, I became very uncomfortable being in that place. So I leave and the next day I go back to the hospital. Surrounding the bed are my wife's relatives. They initially didn't move and don't let me get near her. I had to push to get to her. At this stage, she was just skin and bones, could barely talk because her cheeks were so hollow. She looked so different that whenever someone from her distant family saw her, they would start crying. I knew the family did not want me there and felt very uncomfortable. I have a strange reaction when I'm very sad and distressed. My throat tightens up and I actually can't talk. It was 3 days before she finally passed away. My wife's sister wanted to talk to me. We went into another room and she insisted that I transfer the apartment that my wife's mother was living in to herself. First, I was very upset because my wife was at the end of her life. Second, my wife's sister's priority was a property, and finally, they did not trust me. My wife cared very much for her mother, and so did I. I would never harm my mother-in-law. The doctors wanted to give my wife more treatment. I'm her husband. They initially didn't ask me. They asked my wife's sister. I stepped in and said it's my decision. I told the doctor to withhold the treatment and let her go. He insisted she have more treatment and that there was hope. She was not living. She was in so much pain. I did not stay at the hospital full time. My wife's family resented me for this. I visited every day, but my wife was pretty much in a coma. I had been with my wife loyally for 4 years. Carrying her to the bathroom, cleaning her up, feeding her, I had to do everything by myself. Not being in the hospital room full time with her while she is in a coma made me a bad husband. They did not want me there, and I did not want to be alone in the same room with her daughter in case of false accusations. Korean courts and police are biased against foreigners, so you have to watch your back. I'd had false accusations leveled at me before. My wife could not talk, but her eyes were open. I leaned over and spoke into her ear, told her that I love her very much. She heard me because all of a sudden there were tears in her eyes. That was the last time I spoke to her. Slowly, her heart was getting weaker. A nurse hooked my wife up to an antibiotic drip. I asked why. Just one more item to add to her medical bill. I went home that night and asked to get a call once her heartbeat is slower. The hospital people were upset that I went home, but I had very little sleep, my legs were buckling, and I was a weak man. In Korea, I have no family, no one to help me if I get sick. I have to look after myself. If I were to pass away, my wife's family would celebrate. I got a call in the morning to come to the hospital. To try to keep my sanity, I went with my dog early in the morning. We sat under a tree and I prayed. I hurried home and then went to the hospital. It was a long trip, so by the time I got there, she had already passed away. My wife was wearing a little bit of jewelry, a necklace and earrings. They went missing. At the hospital, I meet my wife's daughter and my wife's sister. They had some kind of official government paperwork in their hands. Turns out it was my wife's death certificate. I asked, "Did you get a copy for me?" "No?" "Gee, thanks." I then need to meet with the funeral director and I'm shown document to sign. I have no idea what these documents are, so I ask a friend to help me out. This was an older Korean lady who had a German husband. She likes my dog and sometimes used to come with us for a walk. My wife's family see her and immediately conclude she is my girlfriend. Just amazing. I have to choose some items for the funeral. My wife was a Buddhist. Some things I don't understand. They show me photos of flower arrangements. The flower arrangements are all white and in a horseshoe shape. I thought the flower arrangement was ugly. My wife was very classy and liked bright colours. I declined the flower arrangement. This made the funeral director and the family very angry. I discovered a few days later why the flowers are in a horseshoe shape. A portrait of the person's funeral goes in the middle. Funerals in Korea are a big money-making scam, especially Buddhist funerals. You need to show your love and assure your wife a good place in her next life by spending a lot. My wife was a humble woman. Outside the funeral room, there is always a photo of the deceased person. The photos always look like a license or passport photo. I chose a photo of my wife wearing a hat with a beautiful smile. I left the funeral hall with my Korean lady friend who kindly helped me with the translations. I then had to invite my wife's friends to come to the wake. Did my wife's family help? Of course not. I got my wife's phone, and in the coffee shop someone showed us how to send a message about the wake to all the people in my wife's contact list. The wake was for 2.5 days. As per Korean custom, my wife's photo was on a table, some fruit, normally flowers, but I said no, and I put her scuba mask on the table because she loved scuba diving. Every person that visited would bow to the photo, and as her husband, I also bowed to the floor. I'm not Buddhist, but I respected my wife's religion, so I was happy to participate in the Buddhist ceremony. At the wake, only a single person from my wife's large extended family came up to me to offer any condolences. My wife's aunt. She did not say anything, but I appreciated the way she looked at me. After the wake, there would be the cremation and then some Buddhist ceremonies at a temple. The ceremonies are also a big money-making scam. I knew that during my vulnerable time, various people would try to scam me. It's difficult to feel grief whilst at the same time staying alert against these scams. I paid all the cost of the funeral. Actually, I did not have to. The insurance policy would pay, but the family did not tell me, as it meant by not claiming on the insurance, they would get more money. My wife's sister arranged for the Buddhist ceremonies, $3,000 for 3 ceremonies, each ceremony lasting 1 hour. I thought this was a ridiculous amount of money. A few years ago, when my wife's father passed, the family negotiated with the Buddhists a low fee. I said we've got big medical bills and $3,000 was too much. A friend of my wife's started yelling at me at the wake. My wife died, and this Korean woman that we had known for 15 years started yelling at me. I politely told her to butt out. I later found out she was bad-mouthing me to everyone. On the second day, the funeral director asked for payment, and it must be in cash. I was not prepared because I thought payment was the next day. I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not ready. I thought payment was the next day." Instead of saying that's okay, pay me tomorrow, he kept saying money, money, money. Another one of my wife's lovely Korean friends was rude to me, and rather than siding with me and telling him he'll get paid next day, that I must pay now. It was raining a lot. My closest bank was a 20-minute walk away. I walked 40 minutes in heavy rain to get the cash. I gave him his money, thanked him for his service, and he just gave me a dirty look. The next day, I was taken into a room and my wife's body was on display. She was clothed with some clothes that I had picked for her. She wore a wig as she had no hair. Next was a Buddhist ceremony. They stuffed her mouth and nose and then slowly wrapped her body like an Egyptian mummy. I did not know this would be done to her body. I did not want to see this, but it was a Buddhist ceremony, so I stood and watched. The ceremony lasted about 20 minutes, and after the ceremony finished, I left the room and felt awful. I just wanted to sit down and calm my mind. Somebody from the funeral hall immediately after the ceremony followed me and started saying money, money, money. Of course, there is a language barrier, so maybe in Korean he might have politely asked for payment. In Korean, I said, please wait 20 minutes. I just saw my wife wrapped up like a mummy and I just want to sit down for 20 minutes. No, 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 money now. They could not even wait 20 minutes to get paid. Total money lust and lack of feeling. I got to the office and I'm presented with a huge bill for drinks and food consumed by the mourners. No way that amount of food and drinks was consumed. Another scam. The money that was donated by mourners was money I'm entitled to. My wife's sister asked if she could take some to use to give to some of my wife's relatives. They were elderly, not wealthy, and had travelled far, so I said, yes, that is okay. I didn't want elderly, low-income people to be out of pocket. That goodwill gesture did not go far. We then went to the crematorium, and at the crematorium, I'm asked for cash to pay to the Buddhists. I said, why right now? There's plenty of time. No, money, 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 cash, now, now, now. And my wife's friends join in with the money now bandwagon. I paid about $120 for the cremation. I was at the crematorium 5 weeks earlier for my friend's wife's cremation. His Korean in-laws told him that they paid for the cremation and that he needs to reimburse them. They said the amount was over $1,000, but for the same cremation, I paid $120. Possibly another scam. My wife's friends would have coffee with me and my wife once a month. I'm the one feeding her, cooking for her, and praying with her. They are wonderful friends. I'm the bad husband because I want peace and not be hounded for cash right now. I'm the husband, I will pay, but I'm just the garbage foreigner. Hand over the money and we pay. Just before my wife's body goes into the crematorium, her family surrounded my wife and started wailing very loudly. It seemed to be a competition about who can pretend to feel more grief. Sort of like how North Koreans will wait 3 days if their dear leader stubs his toe. I was quiet. After about an hour, we get the urn with my wife's ashes. My wife's sister and my wife's daughter take the urn. They don't want me anywhere near it. I'm now surrounded by Koreans. I'm the foreigner. If I demand the urn from 2 Korean women, it will not end well for me. Everyone will take their side. It's the foreigner being nasty. I let it go. In the end, it's only ashes. In Korea, as a foreigner, you have to pick your fights carefully. As a foreigner in Korea, you are tolerated, but you are always an outsider and disrespected. If I was Korean, there is no way, as an older male, I'd be treated this way. Under the Korean Confucian pecking order, I was high up on the list, but only because I was my wife's husband. The moment her death was imminent, I dropped dramatically down the list to the very bottom. Later, in the afternoon, I get a call from a friend at the marina. My wife's family have arranged to scatter her ashes at sea. They did not tell me, and I quickly went to the marina. Her ashes were scattered at a spot where we used to go diving. The next day, I get a message from my wife's best friend. In the message, did she offer any condolences that my wife passed away? No, nothing. She demanded that I deposit $300 into her bank account and $300 into another woman's bank account with no explanation, and that if I did not pay the money, I'm dishonest. This was a woman who a few weeks earlier was telling my wife and I that she loves us. I asked her to meet me for an explanation, and she refused. A few days later, I get a call from a Canadian guy I know. He is the husband of one of the women wanting money. He wants to come visit me and console me. This is a person that proclaims himself a big, caring human and that he cared about my wife, as he likes to declare on Facebook. Even though not once did he visit her in hospital, despite working a few minutes away, or ever even visiting our home when she was sick. He comes to my home. I'm wary but polite. We chat for about 1 hour, and as he's leaving, he says, "So are you going to give me the money?" "Oh, so that's why you came here." I gave him the money, and I never saw or heard from him again. I now get a message from my wife's daughter. She wants to discuss my wife's estate. I said okay, and offered to pick her up and take her to dinner at a place where we ate with my wife. She has no English, so my translator friend comes with me. She arrives with her cousin, but refuses to have dinner with me. I promised my translator friend dinner, so I said she'll have to wait until we have our dinner. The daughter knew there was a will, but immediately demanded half of the apartment my wife and I lived in. I said that is not what your mother wanted. She said, "I don't care, I want half of the apartment." I offered her an insurance policy. At this stage, I did not know the value. Even though legally I was entitled to most of the policy, I offered all of it to my wife's daughter because it was a policy my wife took out before we were married, so clearly it was not intended for me. Her eyes and her cousin's eyes lit up at the prospect of making a profit from my wife passing. Any money in my wife's bank account she kept referring to as my mother's money. Not even a thanks for looking after her mother for 4 years. No thanks for sacrificing. Get lost, foreigner, and hand over the money. During the next few weeks, I'm tying up some of my wife's affairs. I get zero help from my wife's family. My wife left instructions to her sister to help me. She did nothing, and in fact, has done her best to make my life harder. My wife's sister was disrespecting her own sister. Her goal was to get as much money as possible. At this time, the COVID scare was going on, and it was very hard to get anything done. My Korean language ability is very limited. At the wake, most of the guys I worked with had Korean wives. I got promises of, "If you need any help, just call." The time came when I needed some help. I'd ask, "Could your wife look at some papers for me?" "Oh, she's busy right now. She's visiting her mother. She's stressed. There was always an excuse. My wife, when she was alive, bent over backwards to help others. I found out very quickly that I was abandoned by all my Korean friends. Simple hello messages were never replied to. When my mother passed away, the grieving was easy. I thought it would be the same when my Korean wife died. It was not. It was very difficult. Lots of men have had to deal with a wife that dies from cancer. In my case, it happened in a foreign country where I'm alone, and then my wife's Korean family tries to destroy me. I lost my wife, my business partner, my family, everything. My parents were long gone. My sister passed, no children. My Korean wife was all I had. I was hoping to have a good relationship with my wife's daughter, but she was not interested. I'm just a foreigner, a stranger. 1 month after my wife died, I get a message from my wife's sister asking me to transfer the property my mother-in-law lives in to the family. Before that, I had no messages at all. No, how are you? Are you okay? Do you need anything? Nothing. She said my mother-in-law was stressed because she was living in a property that I legally owned. Why was she stressed? My mother-in-law was an older lady. She was my wife's mother. I would never do anything to hurt her, but I'm the evil foreigner. I said I needed time to find out about any taxes. I was accused of being a bad husband. I paid $3,000 for my wife's ceremonies. This was important because my wife's mother was a devout Buddhist. I go to the first ceremony. My mother's wife did not even come to the ceremony that I paid for. 7 weeks later, there was another Buddhist ceremony. I hated these ceremonies as they made me feel awful. My wife's family changed the date of the ceremony and did not even tell me. They did not want me there. I found out through the grapevine the new date. I went to the ceremony. My wife's family and friends were all at one end of the temple, and I was alone at the other end of the temple. After the ceremony, we were supposed to have lunch together. I was supposed to have lunch with the people that were rude and vicious to me. I excused myself, and I just left. Not once did I make any threats against my wife's family, but I'm being threatened with lawyers, so I had to find a Korean lawyer. I never had anything to do with Korean lawyers before. I went from lawyer to lawyer. I was shocked at how incompetent, useless and scamming they are. My wife knew this. That's why she asked her sister to help me. In Australia, I used lawyers a lot in business, so I knew a decent lawyer from a clown. The first lawyer quoted me $20,000 to do a property transfer when the going rate was $500. The same lawyer quoted me $2,000 for 1 hour's work handling a simple insurance claim. The second lawyer quoted me $250 an hour, but then, to meet my wife's daughter, wanted $2,000 no matter what the outcome was. My wife trusted her sister. She made her the executor of the will. My wife's sister refused to be the executor of the will. Despite 2 witnesses, my wife's signature, my wife's handwriting, the sister-in-law signing, the Korean judge threw out the will. The will was what my wife wanted, and her family had it cancelled. I paid for a top-notch lawyer. His argument consisted of a simple newspaper article. First court case, I lost. The judge ignored the fact that my sister-in-law, who agreed to be the executor, makes a big profit by getting the will set aside. The judge also ignores the fact that my wife's sister and my wife's daughter are both colluding to rip me off. And the judge ignores my wife's wishes despite the clear evidence of what she wanted. I knew the court case would not go well. Evil foreigner versus Korean girl. They have a strange system in Korea whereby they also put an ink stamp in documents. However, this is being phased out. My wife's will lacked the ink stamp, and my sister-in-law planned this. Just before my wife died, the sister-in-law was always visiting us. Previously, she rarely visited, and the stamp went missing. I'm not accustomed to the stamp system. Plus, I was under huge stress and my brain did not operate well. My brain was so cloudy. The lawyer acting for my wife's family made a lot of money by getting the will of my wife cancelled. It was legal, but very immoral and shady. This story shows the sleaziness, greed, ruthlessness that some Koreans display towards foreigners. This has not just happened to me, but thousands and thousands of people in Korea and around the world have had to do this. This mindset most probably comes from the education system. It's very nationalistic. I don't know if this still happens, but Koreans were taught they have superior brains. My Korean wife, when I first met her, was brainwashed by the Korean education system. She was very nationalistic. Being married to me, she learnt the truth to the point that she was embarrassed to be Korean. One time, a Korean guy started screaming at me that I had stolen his money. There were other Korean people around. For some reason, he chose me as the thief. Eventually, the police got involved, and my wife came to sort things out. The cop said to my wife, "Why are you defending him? He's a foreigner." She said, "He's my husband and he's done nothing wrong." Eventually, they determined my accuser was crazy and no money was missing. I got no apology. I had 2 Korean lawyers and a property transfer specialist examine the will. One lawyer was a retired judge and head of a large firm. The expert legal advice I had that the will was fine. They were wrong. At this stage, virtually every Korean person I knew shunned me. I did not know what to do. My Korean boss saw that I was stressed, as I had lost a lot of weight. She offered to help. Her father was a retired judge. He was great, but unfortunately gave me bad advice. Because the will was thrown out, the matter has to go to court, and court did not go well. Some of this was my fault. The stress of cancer for 4 years, my wife's death, being alone, getting fired from my job, these were all slowly taking a toll. I studied a lot about health and nutrition, got some supplements to improve my health, and also prayed and meditated a lot to improve my mental and emotional health. I think I was a very depressed person. I did not lock myself away or stay in bed. I got out there and did what I had to do, smiled at people, but underneath felt sadness and missed my wife a lot. So because the will was cancelled, we needed a second court date. The judge initially decided a 50-50 split on the property. By law, the maximum my wife's daughter could get was 40%. I objected. She eventually was awarded 44%. My wife's daughter has never contributed anything. I put money into the property. I paid the mortgage. I paid the tax. I lost income. The mortgage was in my wife's name. There are no joint bank accounts in Korea. What my wife had to do was take money from my bank account and put it into her bank account in order to pay the mortgage and expenses, but the money came from me. This was irrelevant. The judge awarded 44% to my wife's daughter. She knows where that money came from. When it came to the judge's settlement calculations, he factored in the property my mother-in-law was living in, an asset in my name, but the apartment we lived in that was in my wife's name, but I contributed to, well, my contribution was irrelevant. I was not trying to take what isn't mine. My wife left me instructions. I'm an honest person and I was just trying to fulfill my wife's wishes. I have the main property and also make sure her mother and daughter are looked after. These people just want to get everything, don't care how my life has been impacted, and will even steal from a baby. As a foreigner, it's very hard to get justice in Korea. Firstly, the lawyers are out to get as much out of you as possible and do as little as possible. Second, the judges are just biased. In hindsight, my life would have been better off if I had just left my wife and gone back to Australia. No stress, more money, a new life, and not sleeping on the sofa. If I had done that, I would have been the evil foreigner husband. Instead, I stayed with my wife during her 4 years of cancer, had enormous stress, lost a huge amount of money, and I'm still the evil foreigner husband. In Korea, the good foreigner is the one that lets himself get exploited and used by Koreans. Stand up for yourself and you'll be hated. I had to try and start my life all over again. Trying to meet a woman in Korea is very difficult. First, there is the language barrier, and secondly, even if a man can speak Korean well, most Korean women will shun a foreign man. I was not divorced, I was a widower. I stayed with my wife through 4 years of cancer. Rather than seeing this as a positive, most women saw this as a negative. I travelled to the Philippines where I met a lovely lady, but with a hearing disability. Her hearing was very weak, so often we had to communicate by writing or me shouting. In February 2023, I married her. It was a very difficult decision as we have a very big age gap and she has a hearing disability. After marrying her, I left her behind in the Philippines and came back to Korea. Despite all the legal problems, my priority was to get my wife to Korea. My wife had no passport, and Filipinos cannot get a visa on arrival to come to Korea. I had to sponsor her for a visa. There was a huge amount of paperwork. 2 months after our marriage, she finally comes to Korea on a tourist visa. I need to get a spouse visa for her, and you are not allowed to apply for a spouse visa inside of Korea. As the Korean government is compassionate to foreign women and babies, they allowed us to apply for a spouse visa because my wife was pregnant. This compassion is very fake. Try actually getting that visa. The Korean immigration department puts impossible hurdles in front of you. Yes, we give spouse visas to pregnant women, but no, you can't have a visa. We had a certificate Philippines marriage license. They refused to provide a visa unless we also provide an Australian marriage license, which is illegal. Without a visa, my wife has no health insurance. There is no temporary visa or a bridging visa. It took 5 visits to immigration, many months, legal advice, a lot of expense and help from the Australian embassy, but finally we got a visa 6 weeks before my wife was due to give birth. I quickly took her visa to the health insurance office. The man at the counter was great. He waived the 30-day wait and added my wife to my health insurance policy. And 3 weeks later, my wife had a problem and had emergency surgery. She gave birth to our son. At 59 years of age, I became a father. The nurse at the hospital was an absolute angel and has helped us a lot. We appreciated her help so much, as very few Koreans at this stage were nice to us. From my Korean's wife family and friends, not a single person has sent a message to say congratulations for having a son. My wife also had 2 ear surgeries here in Korea. Her hearing will never be perfect, but it is much better. We are very grateful to the surgeon. My son was born in Korea, but because he is not Korean, he is not a Korean resident. More Korean racism and nationalism. A newborn baby born in Korea does not have citizenship, does not have a visa, so now we have a baby with no health insurance. Can I get a temporary visa so that he has health insurance? No. The racism and discrimination even extends to babies. I'm not a Korean citizen, but I do have permanent residency status. We get citizenship and a passport for our son at the Philippines embassy. The staff were fantastic. With our son's passport, I can now get a visa and health insurance for my son. I had to sign a declaration that my son will never apply for Korean citizenship. Again, Korean immigration just invent a new hurdle to prevent giving a baby a visa. They want a birth certificate from the Philippines, even though he was born in Korea and has a Philippines passport. He was born in Korea, there is no Philippines birth certificate. They want to deny a baby a visa on the basis I don't have a document that does not exist. I knew their tricks and came prepared with an official list of requirements from the Seoul office. They backed down. He can only get a visa if I sign a statement saying my son will never apply for Korean citizenship. They don't want a foreign child born in Korea to ever get citizenship. There are some government programs to help with raising a child, a diaper allowance, a baby formula allowance. Despite my paying taxes the same as Koreans and being a permanent resident, we get nothing for our baby. Those allowances are only for Korean babies. The Korean government is so racist that it discriminates against babies. I've been to a few government offices to try and get this resolved. Do the Korean staff care that the baby faces racism? No, they don't care. The baby is not Korean. Korea is an okay place to live as long as you have a Korean wife that is alive. You'll be tolerated as you are the husband of a Korean. Once your wife is gone, the gloves are off. It's even worse if your wife and child are not Korean. My wife's family know I have a baby and a wife with a hearing disability. We are still living in the apartment that my Korean wife and I lived in. They refused to come to an agreement with me and have applied to the courts to have the property sold and my wife and child evicted. The apartment will be sold a few days before the 4th anniversary of my wife's passing. These people are so evil that they want to evict a baby. The eviction notice that we got was even in my baby's name. The apartment in which my mother-in-law lived in, legally I could have her evicted or ask for rent. She is my wife's mother, so of course I did not do that. I paid the yearly tax on the property and never asked once to be reimbursed. Last January, my Korean mother-in-law moved out of their apartment to go to a nursing home, and I was not told. The apartment was very far from me. I found out months later she moved out. The apartment was dirty, trashed, and some debts were left behind. With a heavy heart, I had to sell the apartment. What I really wanted to do was give the apartment to my wife's family. They were my wife's instructions, but they did not care about my wife's will. I contacted a few agents writing in Korean. No one wanted to deal with a foreigner. Finally, it was sold at a big discount. My wife's daughter keeps calling me a liar and is always rude to me. Not once have I been rude or disrespectful to my wife's family. My wife would be turning in her grave seeing how disgusting her friends and family behave. Soon, we will be evicted. I have a short-term job lined up, and soon we will leave Korea. Despite being here 20 years and having met countless Korean people, there are only two that I regard as friends. The Filipino community here in Korea have been fantastic. I look forward to leaving Korea and starting a new life with my son and wife. At 59 years of age, having a baby is going to be a huge challenge. God will look after our family. For those wanting to get involved with a lady in Asia, she may be wonderful, as my wife was, and you can choose carefully, but you might also have to deal with a racist government that has a lot of power and you can't win, and a society that has been brainwashed with nationalism and disrespect for others. So, be careful.